A building design architecture drawing, simply put, is the plan according to which a home or other buildings are constructed. This includes both the interior and exterior of the structure, which is broadly based on architectural engineering and technical applications to design of new buildings. All building projects require the services of a building designer, typically a licensed architect. Larger or more complex building projects require the services of many professionals trained in specialized disciplines, usually coordinated by an architect. What is the best way to go? Stay tuned as our professionals help us on building designs, drawings, and decorations. And in the studio to assist us on this important discussion are Mr. Ben Adakwa, an architect of Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA, and Ms. Lauren Echekulu of Interior Designers and Decorators Ghana, IDDG, and she is the president. Again, I urge you to visit our social media pages. We are the Pyamid_show on Twitter, and on Facebook we are 360mediagh.net. And also be reminded that you are always given the opportunity to send us your thoughts and what your current condition of your building is by sending us a WhatsApp on 0500 180 697. 0500 180 697. We take a break. The show returns. Thank you for staying with us. You are once again welcome to the Pyramid Show, where you find answers to all your building-related challenges. Today with me, as mentioned, we are paying attention to the building drawings and designs, and also the interior decorations and designs. And with me, my guest today, I have with me Ben, and he's a specialist when it comes to sustainable building, and also the president of IDDG, Interior Designers and Decorators Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making the time to be part of our discussion today. Starting with you, Ben, what is building drawings and designs, and what is the importance of it?
Okay. First of all, may I say good afternoon to your listeners, and thank you for inviting me onto your show. Building drawings are simply a tool for communication between various professionals in the building industry and also with the clients. There is a saying that the first casualty of every war is the plan. And it doesn't mean that you can go to war without a plan. If you do, you're going to be the first casualty. So planning is very, very important. And as I say, building drawings are the means by which the architect can actualize or realize their own ideas, then communicate those ideas with other professionals who they work with.
So is it the idea of the architect or is that of the client? Because I'm asking myself, if I want to build a house and I want about 2-bedroom, I'm looking at the height this way, the aesthetics maybe with more cladding, in other words, more glass. Is it that the decision of the architect, or that is supposed to come from me?
Well, I mean, I'll say the architect looked at drawings in a different manner from what the client would do. In other words, architects design in 2D, but actually visualize the work in 3D. The client would understand a work in 3D better than 2D. The 2D is just simply orthographic projections of plan, sections, and elevations. Sometimes I show a plan to you, you probably won't understand what it means. If you're a layman, you don't know what a plan's meant to be. So it's a language that is peculiar to the architecture profession and also the other professionals who work in that particular environment.
As a client, why do I need a building design and drawing? Why do I need it?
Well, you need it, first of all, to know precisely what it is that you are going to pay for. This is what I mean. If you approach me that you want a building in a particular way or a design in a particular way, it's purely subjective. And I give you a design, didn't know what it was going to look like, and I built it for you. It will be too late, because when you make a mistake on a drawing, you can simply press a button and delete, it's gone. When you get to site and you build a wall and it's a mistake, it's not a matter of delete, it's sweaty palms. Yeah?
Okay. And that's going to cost you financially, I believe.
Absolutely, it's cost, yes. Essentially, that's what it is.
Okay, yeah. Lauren, you are the president currently, Interior Designers and Decorators Ghana. And do you think, let me ask you this first, what is interior designing and decoration in the first place?
Okay. Interior
and how different is it from the work of the architect?
Okay, so interior design is the work that happens inside the house. So after the architect have obviously, manifested, this structure or this building, what happens is interior design, they plan the spatial planning of the house to make sure that it's functional. So the most important thing here is that interior design make the use of the building more efficient.
Okay, you would want to give us a typical example for us to relate?
So, I mean, a very typical one would be using like a hospital.
Okay.
It's important to obviously incorporate interior designers into the planning of a hospital because there's so much activities that happens in the building. There's also a saying that, the space shouldn't conflict the user in the space, right? So you should be able to envision what the place is going to be used for and how efficient and functional it is. A building is of no use, not to the client or even to the architect who built it, if it cannot be used functionally.
Wow.
It's because, you're building for it to have significance. You are building for it to have meaning to the people in there. So if the client say, I want you to build a hospital, the hospital should have, the internals of the hospital should have a healing element, which has to do with how the space is planned, what elements are on the wall, colors, all these things are elements, whether there are greenery in the space. These are all elements that contribute to the actual living experience of the user. And that you can't actually, minus it out at all.
Okay, going on, I'll be asking you the importance of having, interior designer do this for your project.
Right.
But how do you get to work with the architect, and who do I call on first?
Right.
As a client?
Okay, you certainly have to call on the architect first. It's very important. You see, here, I think there's a misconception here in Ghana generally about the profession. It's an industry, built environment is an industry that has different specialists within them. And all of them need to work together in order to actually get the best results that you want to achieve. Whether it's a commercial space, whether it's a specialized space, or even a residential space. The architect is a journalist in the sense of they have an overview of the entire process from start to finish. So they can actually, produce their master plan, as he said, when you're going to a war, the master plan of how to actually, how the whole strategy will look like.
Okay.
Then you have, obviously the civil engineers who come in and look at the structural of the plan. Is it doable? Is it stable? Is it going to last? How long is it going to last? These are all things that you have to think about when you're building a house. How long do I want my house to last? If you want it to last 100 years, you have to incorporate certain materials that obviously nowadays people don't do, or even incorporate a civil engineer into that process. Then you also have to look at what am I going to use the space for? And am I going to leave the space in a state where it can grow within time? So will this space still be able to be used in 100 years' time? And this is where the interior designers come in. So these are all elements where when you're building a house, I think it's very important to put together a team that understand all these processes.
Okay, so if you are watching me, I would want to know what is the current state of your building, the design, what do you make of it? And if you have plans in the future to also build a house, or probably you're in the process of developing one, you definitely want to talk to me about it. You can do so through the WhatsApp number 0500 180 697, 0500 180 697. And our experts here will help you understand what you are confused about. Now, Lorraine, you've spoken quite well, but the other thing I wanted to know is that how do you work hand in hand with the architect? Is it the architect that calls on you, or the client is supposed to come to you when he or she is done with the architect so that you also get to do your designs? It's two ways, but most importantly, I think, again,
we're practicing things very differently in Ghana or on the continent than it is practiced anywhere else. Normally, if you contact an architectural firm or entity to help you build, they should have all the specialist people within their practices. Here in Ghana, what tends to happen is that these people obviously work in silos, in a sense, because most of the architectural firms just stop with just drawing, and then they leave it for the contracting companies to also do their part. But what should happen is there should be, an inter-conversations or inter-working with all these entities to make sure that, we're actually doing the right thing. And I think that's what's missing here. I'm not sure.
No, I mean, I would just echo what you're saying there. In reality, every architectural firm should have a pool of consultants or professionals who they work with when it comes.
Namely?
Well, structural engineers, quantity surveyors, interior designers, landscape architects, all of them. These are all professionals within the building industry, and they are usually associated with architectural firms. So if you have a project, or you've got a project and you want or intend to start a project, the first port of call is the architect's office. And if they found that their work is outside their scope of work or smaller than what they want, they could just pass you on to another professional, which is what they do in the UK. I think they do that here as well. It shouldn't be a problem, actually, because there's no way that anybody can practice in isolation. You have to work with other professionals, no question about that.
Okay, take us through the process of a potential client that comes to you that he wants a building design. What happens? How is the journey like?
Yeah, I mean, if you come to me that you want a type of building, first I would like to know if you have a brief. The brief is a starting point. It's a document, it's a legal document, so that you, at the end of the day, can't turn around and say, well, I didn't say I wanted a 2-bedroom house and you gave me a 3-bedroom. This is what I mean. So you have to state your intentions. And that should be a document called a brief. The architect can actually help you develop that. And secondly, there are other things that the architect can also direct you to do, and that is get a quantity surveyor to take a survey of the site. If it's a brownfield site and there are other buildings there that need to be demolished, you need a good condition survey of what is on there before you start the work. You see what I mean? So the architect is usually the first port of call, who will then redirect you to other professions who they work with. And that is, there's always a pool of consultants that works with architects.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you've spoken about the briefing. Assuming I come into agreement with you that, okay, I'm okay, you can go ahead with this debriefing that has happened. As the architect, what happens? Do you just go designing? You commence the design, or the other things as a professional you will do behind the scenes? Yes,
I mean, it varies. Practice varies from one practice to the other. But personally, what I'll do, if you approach me with a brief, and I think we have agreed on a brief that it's doable, then the next thing is the site. We'll have to visit the site, get a quantity surveyor to take measurement, make sure that if there are trees there, they can be preserved. And if they cannot be preserved, we'll probably try and work around it. And that is, you take the ecology of the place into account to make sure that you do not disturb the existing ecosystem. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the level of work which is happening at the moment elsewhere in other places. But it doesn't seem to affect the profession here in Ghana, because I've seen a lot of sites, and if you drive towards a Brie, they actually have cleared the site before they even started putting a single block down, which is totally wrong, because effectively they've just simply destroyed the ecosystem there before they even started. And there's a lot of uncompleted buildings scattered everywhere. This is a nuisance. It shouldn't happen. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It shouldn't happen at all, because nature as it is has to be respected. But I don't think we have reached that point yet. We are heading towards it. Soon we will get there.
So that's site reconnaissance
Yeah.
you're talking about. So is it just the ecology you pay attention to?
No. I also need to look at the character of the area, the culture of the people there, even the attitude of the client also have to be taken into account. So when I say I have to look at these things, it means I'm actually analyzing.
Okay, the culture of the people.
Yes.
Can you explain to us?
Well, I mean, if there's a particular history behind the area where you intend to build, you have to know it.
A history like?
Well, like, presumably like Atakwame buildings. And that's what you can find all around you. You find that if you go and put a block work there, it will stick out like a sore thumb. And you don't want that. So you want to blend in.
The number of stories they go?
Well, yeah, I mean, you want to build something that is sympathetic to the area into which you are building. So you have to analyze. It's very important, though, that analysis bit, because the design process starts with a huge analytical work. And then as you move towards the end or the center, you begin to synthesize, because the analysis is where you get your ideas. And then when you've got those ideas, they usually come in bits and pieces. You have to synthesize them to make a whole. There's a saying that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. You have to put it together. So if I could just echo a point that was made
By Lorraine.
Yes, about function. At the moment, the school of thought is that form follows function. What does that mean? It means you do what is expected of you to make the building work. And it is also expected that once you got the form or the function right, any form that follows it should satisfy the aesthetic requirements. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Exactly. So you don't actually go out there to say that I want the building to look like this or like that, especially. But you design, taking into account the actual form, the functions that you want, and then the forms will follow.
Now, a story that I read where the occupant of the house, the building, normally complains about the room being too hot. And one architect friend, Tetenyo, mentioned that probably during the Reconnaissance period, maybe the designer didn't pay attention to the direction of the wind, didn't pay attention to the topography. You would want to throw more light in that direction?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very important also that you spend a bit of time on the site to get a feel for the site, see where the direction of the winds is, because in a climate like this, you want what we call cross-ventilation. What does that mean? Cross-ventilation means you should have openings in opposite walls, because wind doesn't blow around corners. It blows in a single direction.
Wow.
Exactly. So if the wind is blowing in this direction and I put my window there, I expect the window in the opposite wall to be open for the wind to actually blow to pass through there.
But most of the things, most of the designs we see, we just see a single window, a single opening to a room. That's wrong.
Depends on who is designing it.
But that's wrong.
If it's not a train, yeah. There are a lot of things that are...
Lorraine, you want to add on to this?
Oh yes, certainly. I mean, it's wrong because obviously the right people are not being involved in the planning process of things. And I think it's something that obviously needs to change. It's very important that people actually pay attention to the environment, what they're building and where they're building. And the importance of blending into the environment is very important. So not building a 5-story building in an estate house where it's not possible or it's not a good thing.
Out of character.
Exactly. So a good architect always will basically will tell you that this is not acceptable. This is not something that they would advise you moving forward. And I think even as an interior designer, in the space as well, it's also important. Hence why he mentioned form and function. It's really, those two things go together. You cannot put together something and then not know what the use of it should be. You should understand what you want to use it for, and then also know how the form should take place.
I see.
And hence why the two of us are...
So, still on the site Reconnaissance,
Okay.
A Kenyan architect friend I had was surprised when he visited Ghana, and his issue was he surprised certain sites probably you see that are hilly slopes, and here we want to cut it with the backhoe, the bulldozer machine, just to make the land flat. But to them, they can actually make a design out of that situation.
Yeah. I mean, I can only, echo this, but by just looking at another example. A friend of mine purchased an old building, which I believe was built by a layman, although the design was actually done by an architect.
Mm-hmm.
They just simply threw the architect drawings away after they got the planning permission, that is the stamp on it, and decided to do whatever it is they saw fit. But that was their first mistake, because when I saw the site, immediately recognized that it was a sloping site, and the best access into that site was from the bottom of that site. You could then have put the building at the top of the hill and raise it so that you can utilize the basement as parking space. If you did that, you have not compromised the actual footprint of the building in any shape or form. You just simply got an extra space from nowhere, simply because of the nature of the site. Instead of doing that, they didn't do that. They put the entrance at the top of the hill into the site, and then they realized they have nowhere to place the garage. So what next? They decided to utilize one of the bedrooms for a garage, which is fine, it's harmless. But later on, further along the line, when the building's long completed, they decided they needed more bedroom than they have. So the garage then became the first casualty of their planning. And it didn't stop there, because then they decided to make it more luxurious by adding an ensuite. Ensuite is a washroom, internal washroom to that room. But then, because all the pipe work has already been laid, they then decided to join the toilet to the wash hand basin and also to the shower.
Wow. That's interesting.
Or into the septic tank. And whatever goes in there, actually does come out.
That's very bad.
Exactly. So in the end, the result was a stench that engulfs the whole building when you go into the house. I mean,
Okay.
what do you do about that? And
Okay.
my advice was just simply to block and put that washroom out of use.
My next question to you, obviously it's very important that before, as a designer, an architect or an interior designer, you bring out the design, you need to pay a visit to the site. That is important. But before you answer that, I would want to tell our viewers that yes, you're part of the show, and you need to tell me what is the current situation with the house you are occupying, or what is your dream like? Do you intend to have a building plan designed for you? Tell me your story so the experts here in the studio can also guide you better. The WhatsApp number to reach out to us is 0500 180 697, 0500 180 697. Ben, I was asking the question, it's of importance then that you need to go to the site to have your reconnaissance done. Our professionals, do they go to the site?
Are we online?
Please, we are.
Okay. Yes, I expect them to. If you don't, then you're wasting your time. It's as simple as that. They have to. Because there are certain things information that you get from the site that you can't get any other way. Not even just looking at the pictures. It's not enough. A good example was the direction of the wind blow. Do you see?
Yes.
And also you're also looking at orientation, how the sun movement throughout the day affect the site.
Okay.
It's also very important.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Laureen, I believe strongly that most professionals do not visit the site. It's almost as if the same dress for you is given to Ben, because the client comes to them, I want a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and they believe that, okay, I've done one for this particular person. Okay, look at this. Do you like it? Probably they just make a few adjustments. They never visit the site to understand the topography. They never visit the site to understand the weather conditions over there, whether the sun is rising in this direction, and for that matter, the windows need to be looking in this direction.
Right.
I believe they don't.
Right.
Do you agree with me?
I think
Do
I
you
agree.
visit the site?
I think I agree with you. But as an interior designer, mostly we are engaged at the last part.
Sure.
So we get to actually deal with some of these issues, you know, where at some point you have to actually recommend an interior architect to actually come and, you know, restructure the windows to make sure that there's ventilation in the building. But I think it's important that you're mentioning this because people, all the professionals and all the built environment professionals needs to make sure that they go to the site to avoid certain things like, you know, all the mistakes that we talked about. I think it's unfortunate that we are in an environment where people are not necessarily abreast with the implication that comes with putting up a building, which is costly. And I think that's why we see a lot of buildings uncompleted. Because halfway through, you realize that, you know, it's flooding, it's raining, and you know, water's coming in. And they say, you know, I've spent so much money on the foundation already, I can't change it. You know, then becomes a stolen project. And I think it's important that, you know, all these things can be rectified if you engage the professionals. And there's enough professionals in this country that are willing to do the right thing. And I think it's important to really, you know, sort them out, whether through the associations that we are both representing, or even, you know, some of the companies that have, you know, are doing great work and not doing just work only in Ghana, but also in other, you know, countries that we've seen.
Okay. Now, Ben, coming back to you, tell me, what qualifies a building design plan to be accepted as a standard drawing? As a building with all its qualities, you know, in place.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. There's no yes or no answers when it comes to architecture. It's not like doing a science subject where one can say this formula works and therefore if you apply it, you get this answer. No, it's not like that. A lot of it is try and error. You see?
Yeah.
And you can start the process and go through. It's about resolving problems. And if you can't find the answer, you have to continue. So sometimes the design process can actually take longer than expected. This is where people make mistakes. When you start a building on site, you can put a timetable to it. But you can't put a timetable to design because you may never get the answers you're looking for at a time when you want it. Do you see what I mean? So in a way, what you're asking is how long is a piece of string? And no answers for that.
Okay.
But that said, it doesn't mean that anything will do. Not anything will do. And that's why it takes training. I mean, we're talking about 7 years training, one of the longest on the academic calendar to become an architect. You have to have the inborn sense. It's called talent, actually, to be able to know what is right and what is wrong. Or you've gotten there, you know, as opposed to where you started.
Okay, it's obvious the kind of design I tell you to do for me is going to affect the funding for the project. But in most instances, we have many people starting and they get stuck on the way, meaning they have lean budget from the start. As an architect, how best would you advise a client on the design choice so that if they have a lean budget, they can still get to complete?
Well, usually the way the building industry goes about it is that during the design process, when you hit a certain point, which is design drawings point, you can then pass the drawings on to a quantity surveyor who will then assess how much it will take to build that particular building. If it turns out that it's over budget, then they come back to the architect and they cut corners to see if it may actually fit the budget. And if it turns out that it's way outside the client's budget, then you have to abandon the project. So
cutting corners, what exactly do you mean? What are some of the things?
Well, the cutting corners bit, you have to do it sensibly. I mean, it's not just anything will do. As I say, there are certain standards which is expected of you when you look at the building code of practice. You have to meet those things. These are basic minimum. It may be that you may have gone over those basic standards. Right. So you can then lower it a little bit just to make sure that you don't go below the standard. That's all it takes. Yeah. So that may help to reduce some of the cost.
Okay, so understanding this better, I'm looking at most people now into floor tiling. Can't we have an option of maybe epoxy, that of normal terrazzo floors to cut down the cost? If they are looking at the normal sliding windows, we can consider the louver blades, the timbers.
That is very basic, because at that point in time, you are probably talking to the interior designer, because they obviously know what is best for the interior.
Okay.
But it's also a question of what the client can afford. Do you see what I mean? Usually that is what it comes down to.
Okay, Laureen, what a client can afford, what are some of the introductions you would do to make sure that the design is within the budget of the client?
Okay. I mean, obviously, there is also a secondary brief that you get in terms of when it comes to the interior aspect of things. So after you've had the space, and this brief basically will tell you exactly what the expectation is for the client and the function of the space. Now, with that, obviously, you would also do some form of analysis to make sure that the materials that the client is requesting for are easily accessible. Normally what happens is that the cost normally goes up because there are materials that are not readily available in the environment in which you're building or you're designing, that needs to be either imported from outside or made from scratch from materials that are not readily available here. And that's where the issue of cost come in. But I think if clients are, educated and also abreast with what goes into making maybe a furniture, what goes into making a sofa, and what companies are available, then what you normally have is that by presenting either your drawings or your mood board, they should be able to, see, okay, are we going to go for a 300,000 sofa or a 20,000 sofa? These are all decisions in terms of what material is made of. These are all nitty-gritty decisions, but it plays a huge role in terms of how much you'll cost. And one of the things that interior designers actually do is to also try to manage costs, the same as the architects also do. We obviously will make certain recommendations, and we will also make sure that we minimize the cost if need be. But then it has to fall into the vision or the expectation of the client. But there are options available. As I said, being able to advise the customers are very, very important.
Now, Ben, Laureen mentioned materials, the kind of materials you use. Here, typically, is the block and cement. Why is it that we don't pay attention to timber, the use of cement board, plasterboard? You can also mention some other materials that can be possibly used for
that is problematic because the choice you've made as a country or as a continent is just happened to be the wrong choice.
You mean the blocks and cement?
The blocks, the cement blocks, because it's by far the worst material.
The worst?
Worst that you can use in a tropical environment.
What is the ideal material to use?
Well, there is no such thing called ideal material, but at least you can compromise by establishing a basis. And if you look at something like bricks, which you can easily obtain anywhere here in Ghana, it's a far better thermal material than block work. First of all, cement blocks behaves like sponge. They can actually soak up water. So when it comes to damp, rising damp and so on, if they haven't actually applied the improved membrane on the foundations, all the water will be soaked up by the block walls. And people tend to hide it when the stains and the mold begin to appear by using either tiles or stone work at the plinth. But it doesn't let the problem go away. The problem still exists. You can apply the improve outside and inside. If it's not applied at foundation level, it doesn't work at all. It won't work because even if you apply it up to say window level, the water will still soak into the blockwork by something called capillary action. and it will exceed that window level. So the place where you applied your damp-proof or your stonework or the tiles, it may look fine, but just above it, over time, it will start to develop mold.
So you believe strongly that this rising damp, the base of most buildings getting wet damp, is because of the use of the blocks?
Well, that's partially part of it. The other part is because here, what I noticed is that they just simply cut holes in walls and put window frames there. Every window needs a seal. Yeah? The purpose of the seal is to throw off penetrating damp. Yeah?
Okay.
The first one you talk about is rising damp. There are three types: penetrating damp and then condensation. This penetrating damp is caused by driving rain or burst pipe or anything like that. Yeah? Now here, the main problem that you have, and this is why you see a lot of people use these plinth, stone plinth around their building, is simply because they have not actually applied damp-proof membrane on the foundation when they were building the floor slabs. Yeah? You can apply it below or above it, depending on how the floor is going to be. But it has to be applied. So for buyer beware signals, I would say that if you're going to buy any building built by anybody, even if it was an architect, ask whether they actually applied PPM.
People can tell I.
Well, then you have to find out, because it doesn't take long.
Yes.
You see the walls actually peeling.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you were talking to us about the other materials we can use to construct our houses.
Yeah.
You mentioned bricks.
Yeah.
Any other material you know?
Well, I mean, bricks, I mentioned bricks now. I think at the moment it's high up on the priority list because it's a local material. And it doesn't take as much as it does when you're producing blocks to actually do it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Anybody can do bricks. It's clay. That's all it is. You know, so that is where I think we should concentrate our attention on.
But people are also saying that it's you, the professionals, the architects. You are the ones giving these block designs to the client. Almost every architect is doing a block design.
Well, I find that problematic here because, I mean, somebody posed this question to me once. This was at the Academy of Arts when I did a seminar on the SASH project. And the question was, you know, the AIG building is not built of bricks or anything like that. It's built of blocks. And if you have all this knowledge.
You mean Ghana is of architects?
Exactly.
Their building is built of blocks. Interesting.
So I then refer the answer to the president of
You are telling people to move away from blocks.
Exactly.
Right. And you are doing otherwise.
Exactly. But then I had to actually pass the question to the chair, who was in fact the then president of the AIG, you know, to answer, because obviously there's no answer for that.
Okay.
But I mean, his answer was obviously inadequate. But he came to meet it, you know. He was there when he came.
Now, Laureen, I need more with the kind of materials we can do.
Right.
I mean, elsewhere you have buildings, you know, constructed, and the exterior is made of the blocks, probably the bricks.
Yeah.
You see most of the internal partitions made of plasterboard, you know, cement board. Why is it that we are spending so much?
Well, why we're spending so much, I don't actually know, but I think there's a type of consumerism that we have here in Ghana that is quite a typical way of copying each other. You know, I think in terms of our homes and our buildings, we need to become more creative. We need to become more, you know, environmentally aware. And some of and I think there are people who have ventured into that experimentary field of using other materials such as fiber. And, you know, when you go to the north, they've been using fiber for a long time in terms of incorporating with, you know, the earth to build. So earth building is something that is quite prominent and it's gaining momentum. You also have things like recycle products, you know, recycled bottles. I've seen a house that's made completely out of recycled bottles. And and you wouldn't think that the base of the house is made out of that. That's also something that, is being... So there are actually many ways, and we just need to really pay attention to how we obviously... I mean, it's a long process, because as an architect, you can make this recommendation to a client, and they might just look at somebody else's building and say, no, I want exactly that. And it's made out of, bricks. So I think the mindset, obviously, with time has to change. And I think the awareness of having alternatives is something that also needs to be, put out there. So a show like this obviously helps.
Okay, so, yeah.
When we're talking about alternatives, the other alternative material is hydrofoam.
Yes.
It's readily available. The only problem with that is it is hydroscopic. That means it can actually absorb a lot of moisture, turn it into water, and turn it into mold. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
In the same way as cement blocks does. So I'm a little bit reserved when it comes to using anything other than...
Now, talk about the Ghanaian mentality. This is what one real estate developer had to say. He said he, advanced, decided to use the blocks, the bricks for the outside of the house, and with the internal partitions, he introduced drywalls like plasterboard. And when consumers come in to look at them, they will just hit their hands against the drywalls, and once they feel like it's not out of the blocks, they walk away, and it had to take a longer period to sell. So the whole thing has to do with also the consumers. But on that note, you can also send us a WhatsApp on 0500 180 697, 0500 180 697. Let us know of what your thoughts are, and we shall be reading them. We take a break, the show return. Welcome back. It's now time to listen to all that you have to say, and Audrey Dushikafu is here to tell us more.
Thank you, Mano. So it's been an interesting discussion so far. Today's topic is on building and interior design. So you can join us in the interactivity by sending in your comments to us on WhatsApp. The number is 0500 180 697. So our first comments coming in is, please, I have my plot on top of a hill. The architect has drawn the plan for me already. I went with him to see the site, after which he designed the house based on my description. How do I know whether he has done a good job considering the topography of the area, since I am a lay person? Also, what advice can you give on the interior design of the house of this particular topography? There is this two-story building just down a small hill, and it's barely 3 years old, and all the walls of the interior bathrooms are wet, and the paintings all falling off. And now this problem is all over the building wall. How best should we correct things? This coming in from Abdul Razak from Kumasi. Greetings to the Pyramid Show. I've come across a lot of buildings that lacks the appropriate finishing, like fixing of external staircases, poor finishings, and landscape management, which leads to my question: where does the architect's work or job ends? What is an architect supposed to do when they have done anything that needs to be done to ensure genuine structure of a building is raised? I'm Enoch from Bodi. What specifically does architects do that makes them different from civil engineer? His second question is, also, in the case of a collapse of a building, should the failure be attributed to the architect or the civil engineering? Most buildings end up in cost overruns, which in most cases attributed to quantity surveyors underestimating the building. Others also attribute that to gold plating, scope creep, and other financial factors such as inflation and exchange rates. In any case, how can the quantity surveyor actually ensure that buildings are constructed within the budget of a client? Interesting discussion, thank you. How can an interior designer make my space function more aptly? That's coming in from Caleb. Next. So you can join in our interactivity on Twitter. The Twitter is @thepyramid_show. And then WhatsApp is 0500 You can still wait and listen to answers to your question.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you for that one. Lorraine, a number of questions around interior designing and how it can be done perfectly. Right. What is your advice? But I think the first question came in, and his concern was with a slopey site, and though the design has already been done, he is asking how best as an interior designer you can help with the design. What would be your advice, considering the topography of the land?
Okay. I mean, in worst case scenario, the entire site needs to be revisited to make sure that, the structurally it's sound. Because it might have been that, the base of it and everything, it's really at the core of the foundation of any building, right? So if there's a problem, it's not a surface problem. As long as you're able to see it, that means it's coming straight up from the foundation. So I would definitely say the site needs to be visited again by an alternative architect, and also surveyors and interior architect and interior designers, and in order to make sure that those problems have to be rectified. Now, clients always have to pay in mind that if you make a mistake, you have to also be willing to pay and make sure you correct it properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ben, he says that the design is already done, but as a layperson, he wants to understand how he can accept that as a good job done.
Well, it's a difficult thing to do, because the stage where they've reached, it looks as if they've already got planning permission. Somebody's put a stamp on it and saying that this building is approved. If it is, then I assume she'll have to put a trust in the town and country planning controllers.
Okay.
That the building is okay. It meets minimum standards.
Sure. Now, Abdul Razak from Kumasi, he said the situation they have with your house, that's wet bathrooms after construction. And he wants to understand what could be the cause.
Well, I mean, first of all, you need to find what the problem is. It could be a rising damp, it could be penetrating damp, and it could be condensation, or all three. So first, he needs somebody to do a condition survey,
okay,
which can be a quantity surveyor or any of those surveyors around.
Okay, so my last but one question. We do not have much time, forgive me. I think they can, we are going to respond to them via WhatsApp when we are done. But this one says that the architect's work, is it just with the designing of the building, or it extends to the landscape, the fence wall, the septic tank design?
Everything, all the above. Architect work involves everything. Architecture is the focal point of virtually everything. All the disciplines come together there. It's arts, it's science, it's mathematics, it's everything. So you have to understand that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, most people too also want to understand how best do they achieve, better interior designing in their home? How do you go about it?
Okay. I think it's always important to involve the interior designer also right at the beginning and not at the end. And I think you risk obviously not achieving the ultimate space and function of the space if you do not do that. We get a lot of people that consult us after the building has been completed. And then they would want to use the building. Initially it was designed maybe for school, now they want to use it for residential, or the other way around. These are all things that obviously it's very crucial to the planning of the building and the master plan of the building.
So do you design, do you draw?
Yes,
the interior
spatial drawing, which is very, very important, because you have to be able to understand the flow of the space. Hence why I said the two comes hand in hand, right? And any architectural firm will have these specialist people like ourselves in there as a team to make sure that, the plan is cohesive, right?
Okay, interior designing. Do we have professionals who do this?
Yes.
And I would want to find the difference between an interior designer and that of an interior decorator.
Yes, certainly. The whole thing is obviously the built environment. As we have the architects at the top, we also have the various different roles that comes in, like the surveyors, the civil engineers, and so on and so forth. With interior design, we have the highest form is obviously the interior architect, who obviously has a qualification that comes in for over 4 years of education. Is not qualified to be called an architect,
Sure.
but is obviously knowledgeable in terms of the structural element and composition of what you require in terms of knowledge to be an architect, and also what you require also to be an interior designer. Now, the second, obviously, grade for interior designers and architects is this interior designer, and that obviously comes from a design field, so it's more of a design thinking framework, and it can be a very multidisciplinary background that you can come from in order to really understand functions of forms. So you have to understand what function that goes in and how that concept is brought to life.
But that of the
Then you
decorator?
have the decorator, which comes right at the bottom, not necessarily have to have any form of education in a sense, but has to have experience in terms of underlearning from either architects or interior designers or interior architects. Most of the time, what we've seen here in Ghana, the industry, is that we've had a lot of people that obviously there were no courses here till a couple of years ago. So most of the people have shops, and they end up retailing and then effectively going into that trade of self-learning and also becoming interior decorators. Now, interior designers, obviously, would have to go to school for that.
I see.
And the minimum education years is 4 years.
4 years.
It's important that we have this discussion because I think there has been a misconception between us and obviously the architect, because if you go to school for a field or profession for 7 years, there's no way you want to be able to have an interior decorator call themselves in any close to the knowledge that you have, right? So it's very important, and I think that's what currently we need to streamline and make sure that people are aware. If you're hiring interior designers, you need to actually understand their background. You need to know, what qualifications they have, what experiences they have, and as an interior designer, you really have to have a wealth of about over 5 to 10 years experience before you classify yourself as a designer.
Thank you. Ben, we have some few minutes to go. Your final words, very briefly.
Well, I mean, my advice is that don't go it alone. If you have a project, go and see an architect. Talk to them, and they'll give you some guidelines how to go about it. If you attempt to go it alone, you may make a mistake which will look banal, harmless, but further along the line, it will have a ripple effect, which can be more costly.
Thank you. Thank you. Lorraine, what do you have to say? IDDG, what are you up to? You have 30 seconds, then we wrap up.
So IDDG is the professional body for interior designers and interior architects, and we're currently actually celebrating next week, we're celebrating World Interiors Day in Ghana. And one of the things that we've really worked on is to make sure that we adapt the International Federation Declaration of Interior Architects and Designers in Ghana. So we're doing a huge celebration on that 27th, and we obviously expect everybody to celebrate with us. And we would have also a special guest, which is the president of the Interior Federation of Interior Designers and architects here in Ghana to really help us with the ceremony of adopting that declaration. That automatically will elevate that profession to the international level to make sure that people are consulting, people with educational backgrounds in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ben Adakwa, an architect, and also Lorraine Okulu, an interior designer and decorator. She's also the president for Interior Designers and Decorators Ghana. Very big thank you to you all for also making time to be part of the show. Be coming your way same time next week. Stay safe.